Last week in my sermon, I said that there's a danger in having one single or universal story. But this week, I think I am safe to say that there are few things as universal in our society today as the struggle to find the right balance between work, family, and community involvement. Paul Loeb, the author of our summer book, Soul of a Citizen, says, "We need to strike a balance between the havens that nurture us and the work that needs doing in the world. Whether we are single or in a relationship, have children or not, have work that we feel called to or not, we are familiar with the need for balance. Self-help books give us all kinds of tips and sometimes suggest that there's a magical equilibrium to strike. In reality, though, the right balance between work and family and community involvement is different for everyone, and it changes over the course of our lives. In order to determine the right balance for right now, it helps to have a sense of our calling and to be clear about our values. Then we can find ways to live those through our work, family, and community involvement. There's a saying that actions speak louder than words, and indeed our daily decisions, though they may seem mundane, actually convey great meaning about what is most important to us. Every day we make choices about our time, our money, our focus. Our bank statements and calendars may be the best indicators of our values and theology. How much time we spend at work, with family, or engaged in our communities tells us something, if not about our values, then at least about where we feel the most pressure. What we spend our money on and how much we give away also reflects our priorities. This week, I was confronted with an important choice about how to spend my time. Do I go to the Stand with Texas Women rally at Dallas City Hall? Or do I come to church to get ready for the book study that night and send the order of service details in by the deadline? This week, I chose work. A few months ago, though, I faced a similar choice the busy week before Easter. Do I go to work? Or do I drop everything and join in a last-minute meeting with Texas State Representative Lamar Smith about immigration reform? On that day, I chose to meet with my state representative. We all make choices like this. Sometimes we jump into community engagement, and other times we pause and say, "Sorry, hun, that's not my table," at least for today. With such choices, of course, can come guilt. I felt bad about not going to the rally because I felt like I should have, and because I wanted to go, but I felt pulled in multiple directions. I felt even more guilty when the Texas Senate voted on Friday to pass the bill that severely limits women's reproductive choices and resources. Not that my presence made it go in that, or not that my absence made it go in that direction, but something to think about. When we choose work over family, or family over work, or self-care over community involvement, there's always someone being let down, it seems. Hence the guilt. But being engaged in our communities and good at our work and devoted to our family does not and should not require us to abandon other parts of our lives. Sometimes we do need to just drop everything and speak out or act, because an injustice calls us to do so. We must be intentional about the choices we make, thinking about our calling and our values as we seek to strike what is a healthy balance for us. Now, ministers often talk about our calling, but I believe that each person and each one of you in this room has a calling as well. Indications of what this calling is may come from God, from other people, from a still small voice within, and from our everyday experiences and relationships. Parker Palmer says that our calling is the place where our soul and our role meet. In a larger sense, our calling may be as a child of God or a citizen of the world. And what we are called to do or to be in our daily life as a child of God or a citizen of the world may be something like to create, to heal or to build, to organize or to serve, to nurture or to challenge. When we have an understanding of our calling, it can help to guide our choices. And our choices are guided as well by what we worship. The words that Aaron shared from Ralph Waldo Emerson say that what we worship, what we lift up as worthy, and what we give our honor and attention to shapes what we do and what we become. Whether we value relationships or comfort or justice or success, this will lead us to treat ourselves and others and to live in the world in certain ways. As someone pointed out in this week's Wednesday night book discussion, if you look at how adults between about the age of 25 and 65 spend their waking hours, you'll see that we spend an incredible amount of time working. Do we worship work or the money that we earn from it? Maybe. Or perhaps we just feel the very real pressures of life. People are working longer and harder than ever while worrying about our economic futures and the future of our children. Low-wage workers barely making enough, professionals answering emails at every hour of the day and night on their phones, stay-at-home parents carrying a tremendous amount of responsibility, students working 2 jobs to keep down the amount of money they borrow, people out of work, navigating a new relationship and a new balance of family and finances and time. All of us feel this pressure in some way. And yet all of us have choices about how we live within that role or situation. It is a gift to be able to earn our living doing what we feel called to. But this isn't always possible. After I finished seminary last year and before I began my ministerial internship, I spent a few months working at a variety of temp jobs in and around Fort Worth. After having the privilege of working in various ministry positions, work that I'm called to, being a temp worker was a humbling experience. There were some positions that honestly I was wary of accepting because the work or the company didn't really align with my values. Other positions I accepted but struggled with because of workplace dynamics that I witnessed or the way I was treated. We cope with these situations in different ways. At one assignment, where my work was basically staring at a computer screen all day and tediously clicking a mouse, I listened to podcasts of the public radio show On Being with Krista Tippett. Maybe you find meaning through the relationships that you build with coworkers or clients or customers. Buddhism has a practice called right livelihood. It's part of the Eightfold Path to Peace, Wisdom, and Enlightenment. Thich Nhat Hanh says, to practice right livelihood, you have to find a way to earn your living without transgressing your ideals of love and compassion. The way you support yourself can be an expression of your deepest self, or it can be a source of suffering for you and others. The name of this practice, right livelihood, implies that there's a right and a wrong way, a pure and an impure way. The right way is engaging in work that aligns with our values, and the wrong way is engaging in work that is not true to yourself or that causes suffering. This is a challenging practice. So this then leads me to the question, how do we live our values through our work when our circumstances are not ideal or when we feel limited in our options? In our summer book, the author, Paul Loeb, shares a number of stories of people who organize for change in their workplace. I've also heard the Reverend Joanna Fontaine Crawford share a story of someone in her congregation in Houston who works for BP. This woman wanted to see her company make a public statement about LGBT rights, and so she got onto the company's inclusivity team and helped to organize a group of over 100 employees to march in the local Pride Parade. Loeb also shares stories of people who, realizing that their work wasn't really addressing the underlying issues, expanded their role beyond the confines of their job description. Deborah Prothrow Smith, a physician, saw person after person come into the emergency room with gunshot and stab wounds, many of them young African American men. She realized after a conversation with one young patient that she was just stitching them back up and sending them back out onto the streets to the domestic equivalent of a war zone, as she put it. So she began working with city hospitals to develop follow-up strategies for patients who had come in with gunshot and stab wounds, and she also helped to develop programs that taught conflict resolution in local schools and in the wider community. Everything she did was in some ways an extension of her job as a physician, but she expanded her calling to heal beyond its traditional bounds. Now reading this story feels especially poignant for me this week with the conclusion of the George Zimmerman trial in Florida. Prothrow Smith saw it as part of her calling to create a safe and healthy environment for young African American men she was treating. If only all people had these same resources that she provided. And the second reading that I shared by Meg Barnhouse also talks about finding meaning in our work, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. She tells what she learned from waitressing and how she relates that to her current job, waitressing in the sacred kitchens, also known as ministry. She learned lessons about juggling the different areas of our lives and when to say, "Sorry, hun, that's not my table." Each of us at times must say, "Sorry, hun, that's not my table." We go through seasons of stepping back from commitments, recommitting when we can, and even though these choices are difficult ones, it's okay. The balance shifts when we begin or end a relationship, when we enter or leave school, when we change jobs, when we have children or children leave home, or when we're caring for elderly or ill family members, or when something happens that just compels us to act. Loeb tells the story of a woman who had been involved in global peace issues for years, but when she had young children, the way she was involved in the movement changed. She found herself doing things that she could work into her family life, tutoring at their inner city public school, or making phone calls, writing letters, or staying involved through church. But she wasn't going to as many meetings or engaging in civil disobedience. When her children are older, she said, she may be able to get involved in these ways again. However we're involved in our communities, and however we balance work and family and community involvement, our children are watching and listening. We know this because they pick up on things that we say. I was just over at my friend's house a few days ago, and they have a 2-year-old who was saying to her dad, "Don't do that, Missy." Guess where she got that from? My parents modeled for me an ethic of connection and service. When I was a kid, they brought me to cleanups of the Pine Bush Preserve in Albany, New York. We walked in the crop walk for hunger and served at food pantries. I learned to love service so that when I was a young teen, I began going out and volunteering on my own, completely independent of my parents. They didn't shelter me from the ills of the world. Instead, they introduced me to the service work that they were doing and taught me to live generously. They taught me that no matter how busy you are working or raising a family, you can still make a difference in your community in some way. This church teaches a very similar message to our children. Unitarian Universalist religious education affirms children's instinct to care, and it helps them to make sense of the troubling aspects of the world around us. In the lifelong balancing act of work, family, and community involvement, church could seem like just another demand on our time. But it's not. Because church is where we and our children learn how to live value-driven lives, grounded in the realities of our world. Church can help us to integrate all the parts of ourselves. When we come to church, we remind ourselves of what we worship, what is most important to us, and what our calling is. When you go through the transitions of your life and enter seasons where you are seeking to strike a new balance between work and community involvement and family, this church community is here to support you. It's the sacred kitchen where someone says, "Come, sit down, hon. Are you hungry?" and refills your coffee, giving you the nourishment and the energy to go out and to live a value-driven life. May this be a place where you find love and support, and a place that helps to guide and to center your life around what matters most. I'm glad that you are here this morning to join us on this journey. Amen.